Welcome back to step 2 of Crocheting Basics. Last time I showed you a basic crochet needle. We talked about how to create a slip knot and make a chain, and we looked at a packet of wool and learned how to read the label. Today I want to build on to that chain that you learned how to make in our last video. And what I'd like you to do is to make a chain of 21 stitches. How to count how many stitches you have. Your chain might be all twisty and turny, but I want you to kind of smooth it out so that you can see the chain loops coming around each other. You count the chain by counting how many loops you have. And so there's my first loop off the bottom. There's the second, third, fourth, and so on down till you have 21. So you can go ahead and pause the video right now while you spend a few moments making a chain of 21 stitches. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and kind of start from the beginning again so you can watch again how I made a slip knot and made 21 stitches. So there we go. I'm going to count them as I go. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, 'So usually when you're reading a pattern, it'll tell you how many chains to make to start a project. And I've chosen 21 because you're actually going to be making a dishcloth out of this. We're going to learn how to do something called a single crochet now. And it is the first stitch that you're going to learn. And you're going to be making it into the second stitch from the end. So if you look right here, we have a loop here. We have a second loop here. And this is the second from the end. So I'm going to put my needle into that hole or loop that's the second from the end. I'm going to bring through a new piece of yarn. I now have 2 loops on my hook, and I'm going to bring a third loop and close it up. That is what a single crochet looks like. It starts to make your skinny little chain become thicker as you're building something. So I'm going to show you again how a single crochet looks on your chain. I'm looking at the second loop from the end. So it's not these two, it's this one right down here. I'm going to put my needle into that loop. I'm going to bring through a fresh piece of yarn, and I'm going to take a third loop and close it up. This is actually one of the most difficult stages in crochet, is your setup row. Things are wiggling around and moving, and you're trying to take your needle, your hook, and push it into the next hole. Sometimes you'll miss the next hole, but I encourage you to just keep going because you're just learning and you don't need to be perfect. So I'm going to take my hook and go into the next hole. Sometimes you might accidentally go in the same one, but I can see the next one is right there. And I'm going to pull another loop through. And then I'm going to close that loop by bringing that last stitch through. So you can see how these 2 stitches here are now starting to look. I usually say a little rhyme in my head to remind me where I'm at in the making of the stitch, and I will share that with you. So I have 1. I'm going to push it all the way through and make 2, and then I'm going to close it and be 1. 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1. So as I make my way across here, you can see these little tiny V's in each of the holes below, and that's a stitch. And if you flip your work and look at the top, you can kind of see a little chain developing across the top. This is the chain that your third row of stitching will go into on our next video. So for today, what I'd like you to practice is going into the next chain, pulling a loop up, and having 2 and going back to 1 and 1 and 2 and 1 and back into this hole and making 2 loops and back to 1. Your goal is this week is to make 1 in each hole all the way across so that you have a little thicker chain that we can build off of. So when we start in our next video, you're going to attempt to be over here. If you make a mistake, like you've accidentally jumped over 1, or you've put 2 in the same hole, just keep going. In the end, it's all going to look good. So you might have things that look like this, where there's a bit of a bigger gap, or that it might look a little crowded because there's 2 in one hole, but you're aiming to put 1 in each hole and have 20 of these little V's all the way across. See you next time.